In today's video, we're going to learn how to write a comparative essay. The two texts that we're going to compare is the film text, The Black Balloon, and the novel, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time. Now, before we can go any further, we really need to understand the different types of topics you could be faced with. Now, our key focus is going to be on the general comparative focus. However, as the years go on, you will need to be able to identify and recognise the different types of topics and what their key features are so you know how to respond to them. So with the general comparative focus, what we're doing here is we're comparing our two texts based on these big ideas which connect the two texts. They will usually refer to the key ideas, the issues, or the themes. And what you need to do is you need to discuss how the two texts explore these concepts. So an example of one of the topics you could receive, and this isn't the text that we've studied, but is compare how the boat and the happiest refugee explore the concept of belonging. So it's quite broad here, explore the concept of belonging. So you have quite a depth and range of things that you could discuss here. Now, the next type of topic you could receive is comparing specific aspects of the text. So what we're doing here is you're focusing on one particular thing, such as the character, the plot, or the setting. You may even need to compare and contrast the specific sections in the text and consider how the characters respond in similar or different ways. Now, another type of topic you could get is comparing aspects of the text construction. And this is where we're really looking at this author's intention. So what was the author thinking when they decided the different style, the language, and the form, and how these contribute to the big ideas presented in the text? And the very last type of topic that you could receive is something where we're comparing two quotations taken from each of the texts. And what you need to do is look at those two quotations and you need to consider which key idea it is that can be extrapolated from these quotations and how each text goes about representing these very similar ideas or very different ideas within their text. Now, before we can even decipher what we're going to discuss in our essay topic, we really need to understand some of the key terminology that we might come across. Now, the very first term we're going to look at is this term compare. And it's really important to understand that if you come across the term compare, we're actually looking just for similarities. So we want to know what are the similarities between the key ideas, issues, and themes that you could discuss between these two texts. Other terms we could look at is the terms consider how. And what's happening here is if this begins the question asking, it wants you to identify the ways that the text and the author explores an underlying concept. So that's those concepts where we read in between the lines and say, what are we actually learning, or what's that hidden message here? And you'll need to discuss once again, so you'll discuss elements of the setting, maybe the character, the text construction, and how these all relate back to this related idea, issue, or theme. Now, we could have what do the text convey type of topics. And in these sorts of phrases, you're looking at the underlying meaning of both of these texts. You want to look at those ideas, issues, and themes and how they're presented and what messages the audience is likely to take away. And how do we understand that this is the message that's been presented to us? The other really key term you need to identify is the term contrast. So it's not like compare. When we use the term contrast, we're looking at both the similarities and the differences. Well, we want you to say, if we're saying contrast, give me both the similarities and the differences. One of the other terms which you should be quite familiar with is this term discuss. And this term is looking at a broad open-ended exploration of the two texts. So don't just say, this is what happens. Tell me how it happens throughout the whole entire text there. So what are your similarities and what are your differences that we can see between these two texts? The final type of term that you really need to get your head around is the do you agree. Now, you really constrain your responses if you completely agree or completely disagree. So what you want to be asking is, to what extent do you agree? And you need to consider the aspects of the topic which you agree with and the parts of the topic that you don't completely agree with. Now, here's our sample topic that we're going to look at that you should write a practice essay on. And what I've already done for you is I've helped you unpack some of these key terminologies within this topic. So it says here, compare and contrast how the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime and the black balloon explore the idea that family relationships are often very complex. So our key terms that we need to look at here, compare and contrast. So what we know from our definitions is what we really need to discuss is both the similarities and the differences within our essay. The term explore, we want to look at the differing perspectives and ideas. So we're not just looking at one idea or perspective. We want to look at both sides of it. Family relationships. Now, this is our key theme that we've been looking at throughout the study of the unit. And so we want to look at how do different family units cope with hardships that are inevitably going to arise within their lifespan. And this term, very complex, making it specific to our text. The key theme of how the different family units cope with disability, the coming of age, marriage breakdowns, another new school, or a new baby. So you really, really want to unpack what do these key terms mean in relation to our topic. So the task that you now have to do is you need to list down all of these key terms. You need to find definitions which are relevant to our text here. So how does this term relate to the text that we're studying? And you need to find some synonyms for these terms. And the reason you need synonyms is your responses become very, very laboured and very dry to read if you use the same words all the time. So you want to have a variety of different terms you could use to substitute those key terms. So I want you to pause the video now and complete this activity. The next thing you need to do now is, now that you've got a whole list of synonyms, I want you to rephrase this topic. So let me remind you. So it could be, how do we see or how do we understand family relationships to be quite sophisticated within both of these texts? So you want to really rephrase this topic and put it into your own words so you know that you actually understand what this topic is asking you. The next step you need to do is you need to pose some questions about the topic. And the reason we get you to pose these questions is so you want to really write down some questions of what is it that I need to answer to ensure that I have addressed this topic. So some of these questions might be, well, why are these family relationships complex? What elements of the family relationships make them complex? What particular issues occur which make these family relationships complex? Because your body paragraphs need to indirectly answer all of those questions to ensure that you're actually talking about the right thing. And the reason we do step 2, the reason this step is so crucial, is this avoids you from discussing the wrong thing in your essay. So instead of just telling me everything you know about family relationships, this will narrow down your discussion and ensure that you're talking about the right thing. And the very third step that you'll need to complete is this write your own contention. And it's crucial that this might just be a rephrasing of the topic slightly, but you really need to have your contention evident in your introduction. So you need to tell me that both of these texts demonstrate to different extents that family relationships can be quite complex. So what I want you to do now is pause the video and I want you to complete these 3 steps. Okay. Now we can move on to the planning phase of our essay. Now we need to just reinforce it is crucial that you plan your essay. Without planning, you tend to lack structure. You don't have a very clear and concise response. You seem to be quite scattered. Now the other thing to note and things that you need to work towards in your planning is that you really want to get your planning done within 5 to 10 minutes, especially on that exam, which will leave you with about 60 to 65 minutes writing time. So the better that your plan is, the easier your essay will be to write. So the first question you might be asking is, well, what do I write about? And so what will I actually compare? So you might have brainstormed a whole heap of different ideas that come down. So if you're not sure where to start, the things that you could write about are the setting, key plots or events that occur in the text, the characters, so key characters that you want to compare that show that family relationships can be quite difficult, The way the text is structured, so maybe we want to look at how Christopher does his text structure within so prime numbers, and how The Black Balloon is a movie, and so how that shows us just particular sections. We might look at different perspectives and concepts raised within the text, so how two different issues may be apparent in these texts, and that's why their relationships are quite different. Or an in-depth discussion of a few of these different points that you might want to discuss. Now, depending on the wording of the question, and with this question you need to look at both similarities and differences. If it was to say just contrast, well, you'd look at both similarities and differences, but if it was to say compare, you could just look at similarities and talk about what the texts have in common. You might just want to look at what the two texts have, what are their points of difference, or you could look at both the similarities and differences. Now, the next task you need to do is you would have sorted out, okay, I'm going to talk about either setting, the characters, the narrative structure. What I want you to do is choose your statement and examples from The Black Balloon and put your evidence down as well, but also